What humans long for is human connection.
Right.
And without communication, you cannot have connection. The leading scientists in the world understand that the more we understand frequencies, the more we understand reality. And so it shouldn't surprise you that the Bible actually unwraps that completely. I immediately started looking at the scriptures and going, wait a minute, if this is valid, I can find this in Jesus. And not only can I find it in Jesus, I can find it throughout the whole scriptures, which I can't unsee this now. Once you understand the 7 frequencies, you can't hear the world the way you used to hear it. You begin to hear people differently. Human beings long for connection.
Yeah.
So much of everything we do, whether healthy or unhealthy, it's our tension with, we long for intimacy and are terrified by intimacy.
Yeah.
And the only way we ever make deep human connections is learning how to communicate. The word communication comes from the same word as community, as the same word as communion. Wow. And when we learn how to communicate, we begin to build community and we move toward the experience of communion.
Sometimes I get the privilege of reading a lot of books, and I always read the book of a guest because I think, you're flying across the country. The least I could do is read your book.
Oh, thank you.
And sometimes I look at a book and think, oh, this is going to be amazing. And sometimes it's not quite as weighty as you hope it would be. This one I picked up and thought, what on earth? And it was completely the opposite. I didn't expect to love this book as much as I loved this book. So I was just wondering, what was the genesis of this for you? Where did this start?
Well, it goes back really even several years where my wife, Kim, I've been married almost 42 years, and she has really begged me for years and years and years to teach on communication. Wow. And I just never did. And I think some of it is I consider communication to be something very sacred.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to dissect it. I felt like it was doing an autopsy on a living thing. And so I was always really resistant. But then my son came to me a few years ago and said, Dad, I want you to create a master class in communication. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, I want to start a company around communication. I think this is your unique contribution. And I want to build it. And I said, well, what exactly is your thought? He goes, I want you to put together this teaching course, a master class, and I'm going to sell it. And I thought, no one's going to buy that class. So I said, you can have 50% of all the profit. So I went in and did a 6-hour master class on communication, the art of communication. And frankly, within a month, I think he sold over $500,000 of master classes. And I was actually shocked, to be perfectly frank. And I really realized that I gave him way too large of a percentage.
Let's revisit that.
And of course, it sounds like a lot of money, except it never made it my way. But what I discovered was that there was a real hunger in the world to know how to communicate. But I realized it's not that. What humans long for is human connection.
Right.
And without communication, you cannot have connection. So then we were building on this, and my son said, can you give us a 15-minute gift just to give away to people? So I went home on Friday, I think it was, and I said, what teaching could I give people in a 15-minute, video series? And I just started praying and opening up my soul. And the way I write books is I can't hardly explain it. I hear the book. It comes to me. And it's kind of a cliche, but it does feel like a divine download.
Yeah.
In that way.
Yeah.
And I couldn't sleep for 3 days.
Wow.
I did not go to sleep. My wife was like, what's wrong with you? She woke up at 4 a.m. I was in cold sweats. I was just writing and writing and writing. And I was seeing the frequencies and I could hear them. And by the time I got there on Monday, they said, okay, let's film the 15-minute thing. And it was a 6-hour masterclass called The 7 Frequencies of Communication. And I heard the first 5 very easily, but the last 2 took a lot of work. And I realized that number 6 that I identified was one of the closest frequencies to me. Yeah. But I still felt there's something missing. The 7th frequency is my primary frequency, and I couldn't see it or I couldn't hear it because it's not a way of speaking, it is who I am.
Wow.
And so a huge part of this was trying to break down 40 years of observation, of learning how people communicate, of traveling to around 100 countries around the world, of diving into different cultures and different languages. And I speak multiple languages. And so that's a part of that dynamic. And for years, Sheila, I would experiment. My kids would be so embarrassed, my wife too. I'd go to different countries. I'd eavesdrop on people in cafes. speaking different languages, then I'd go up to them and say, did you just say this? And did you just say this?
Wow.
And pretty close to 100% of the time, they would say, yes, do you speak Italian, or do you speak French, or do you speak Korean? And I go, no, I listen to human frequencies. And I can actually understand what people are saying just by paying attention to the frequency. So I had been exploring this for decades without even realizing it.
Wow.
So it's one of those things where I spent 5 decades studying this, and then 3 days downloading it, and then realizing God just gave me something that was unexpected. If I've ever written a book where I felt like God just sort of like handed it to me and said, I want you to take this to the world, it's this book.
Wow.
It's very, very different. I don't think I can take credit. I didn't invent something, I discovered something. It's very, very different.
Yeah. And honestly, I got that reading the book. But for Betty, who's sitting at home now in Minneapolis thinking, why did you even call them frequencies? What is a frequency?
I know. And Betty's probably like my wife, Kim. Honey, you use all the wrong language. You use all the language that terrifies Christians. But if you want to step back on a cosmic level, the Bible says that God spoke and said, let there be light. Yeah. And that voice is a frequency. And that frequency created the entire universe. And even now, scientists who study the inception of the universe say that there is what they would call a quantum fluctuation, a vibration that had to exist before matter existed, which is actually a scientific way of identifying that there was a voice that spoke before matter came into existence. And so I actually think that frequencies are the language of the scriptures. We just didn't know it. We just didn't have the frequency to hear it. It's always been there. Even Jesus in John 10 saying that my sheep hear my voice. They know my voice, know the voice will they follow. He's actually talking about a frequency.
Wow.
And then all the way back to Genesis, where, the serpent that speaks to Adam and Eve. Yeah. Like you in the book, there's a section on shadow frequencies.
The dark side. Yeah.
The dark side of each frequency. And you can see that narrative all the way through the Bible. Yeah. So I use the word frequency because I actually think humans operate on a frequency. And I think even the universe does as a whole, the way God created everything. If you have a pet, you can see it in the most simple way.
It's our dog's 12th birthday today, so
okay.
I just thought I'd share that.
So you think your dog understands you, but your dog understands frequencies. Because when you speak to your dog in a kind frequency and you say, you're the dumbest dog in the world, you have no value, they're still wagging their tail. And if you yelled at them and said, I love you, you're the most beautiful dog in the world, but you said it in a different frequency, they would feel like you're reprimanding them.
Wow.
Because animals don't speak our language. They don't speak English or Spanish or whatever it is. They actually speak frequencies. And if an animal can understand a frequency, how much more does a human being? And what I would say to Betty is, your marriage doesn't survive because you hear what your husband says. Your marriage survives because you hear the frequency in which he's saying it.
Wow.
And the reason so many people have...
Is that a reason for so much of the breakdown in relationships? Because people don't hear the frequency the person's speaking?
Yes, and because we think everyone should speak at our frequency.
Oh, wow.
And so a huge part of writing this book isn't just about understanding the frequency from which you speak, but to be able to understand the frequency from which other people speak.
Wow.
And to be able to process that frequency properly. And so in the book, there are 7 frequencies that I break down. And those are the 7 dominant frequencies. And they're just the motivator, the challenger, the commander, the healer, the professor, the seer, and the maven. And just in a more personal way, my wife, Kim, her number 1 frequency is a commander. And so everything my wife says to me is always a command. It's always a very directive. It's always logistical, like do this, move from here, move to there. And 40 plus years of marriage, every night she'll say to me 2 things. I'll say, I love you, honey. And she'll say, lock the doors and turn off the lights. and it would be really easy to be offended.
Yeah, absolutely.
By a frequency of continuous command, except that I reinterpret all that. So when she says, lock the doors and turn off the lights, what she's saying is, I trust you to keep me safe.
Yeah.
And to take responsibility for everything we have.
I have this kind of ongoing conversation relationship with where I go and get my hair done. There's 2 guys, and I really love them, and they're very different. They're very creative. And we talk a lot about, like, if I write a book, I'll sign it and give it to them, and we'll talk about it. We talk really honestly about what makes sense and what doesn't. And so one of them asked me the other day, so when it comes to praying, how do you hear God's voice? Which I think is a great question. And he said, because my personal belief is that we throw things out into the universe and then we manifest it. And so I talked to them about the fact that, that through God's word, I feel God speaks to me through his word. I feel it all the time. I mean, it's like every morning I'll take my dog Maggie out for a walk and we'll talk about things, but with the Lord, this conversation that God wants to communicate. And I think that that's what everybody, these guys, even though they think some of my stuff's nuts, I think it's what we're all longing for, to know that there is a God and he wants to talk to us.
I think that also happens for those of us who do believe in Jesus.
yeah, that's true.
Because a lot of times we try to control the conversation between us and God rather than allow God to actually lead that conversation. And even with the frequencies, I said, a lot of times we want God to be a healer when what he needs for us to be is a challenger. Wow. And sometimes we want God, to be a motivator, but what we really need is for God to be a commander. Wow. And so what happens sometimes is when God's speaking to us in a particular frequency and we insist on only hearing a different frequency, God seems silent to us.
So what would you say to somebody who says, I want to hear the voice of God, but I don't know how to hear the voice of God?
Well, I mean, practically, that's why the Bible, to me, is so important.
Yeah.
My understanding of the scriptures is, the truths in the scriptures will change your life. But what will really change your life is hearing God's voice through the scriptures, because then you can identify his voice when you don't have the scriptures. Mm-hmm. And if you're not listening to God's voice and what he's spoken to you in the word, you're not going to be able to hear his voice when he's speaking to you in the world.
Wow.
And so that, I think the Bible actually tunes us in to hearing God's voice.
I remember, I was brought up in a little Baptist church on the west coast of Scotland and went to seminary when I was 19. Because I was trained to be a missionary because I was a Baptist and that was my only option, was to be a missionary because I was a woman. But the place where I heard the voice of God most clearly was when my life crashed and I ended up in a psychiatric hospital. Mm. And I remember that very first night, someone coming into my room and putting something you give a child, like a little stuffed lamb, into my hands, and walking out and just turning and saying to me, Sheila, the shepherd knows where to find you. And at the place where I felt, my dad took his own life in a psych hospital. Mm. The place where I felt was going to be the end of everything, and that God was no longer pleased with me, and that God was done with me. I heard the voice of God clearer there than anywhere.
Mm. That is so beautiful. And that is so consistent to the way God always works in our lives. He if you use the language of frequencies, he knows what frequency we need in that moment.
Yeah.
And it is interesting to me that your dominant frequency, because you took the assessment, and by the way, it's not a test because you can't fail it. All right. And it's an assessment.
Yeah.
It helps you identify yourself, understand yourself. Your dominant frequency is healer, which shouldn't surprise you and anyone who listens to you. And the frequency you send into the world is that you're safe here. You can find healing here. You don't have to hide your brokenness. You don't have to hide your wounds. We're going to also invade your soul in the hidden, broken places and help you bring light to it so that you can be healed.
Wow.
So it shouldn't surprise you that God met you when your frequency was in a context where it was so dominant that you needed healing in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first came to America, the thing that blew me, because I was born in Scotland, the thing that blew me away was just churches everywhere.
Yeah.
Just churches everywhere, different denominations, different churches. And yet, when I look at where we're at the moment in the world, it just seems like the frequency that the world is getting from a lot of us is just this anger and this polarization, and that we have now defined God by what he stands against as opposed to who he is.
Yeah.
What do you think about where we find ourselves today?
Yeah, I think it's a very challenging moment because for several reasons, not just the church, but the culture. Mm-hmm. One of the things that happened as I wrote this book is at first I did not identify what in the book are called shadow frequencies. I didn't have that at that my first pass. What ended up happening is I lead a business mastermind called The Arena, and they meet with me online every week. And I said, give me 2 TV shows and I'll break them down based on the frequencies. So they picked Friends, which is a classic, and they picked a more contemporary show called Succession, which is a very dark show.
Yeah.
And so I picked Succession. So I went in and watched the pilot of Succession and couldn't find a single frequency.
Wow.
And I almost had a panic attack going, it doesn't work.
Yikes.
Not only did I not find all 7 frequencies, I didn't find one. And so I stepped back and I was a little nervous and I thought, what am I going to tell my mastermind next week? And I heard this little voice that said, listen for the shadows.
Wow.
And I identified the shadows of every single one of the frequencies. And then I went in and watched the show, and there are 7 characters and they have 7 frequencies, but they only operate from the shadows.
Wow.
And the reason I highlight that is that we have a generation that's being taught to communicate only from their shadows. And they think the shadows are the normative way of communicating with each other, which is why we have so much loneliness, so much disconnection, so much conflict, and so much inability to understand each other. And then I started, when the book went out, I had a lot of CEOs, a lot of business people, a lot of entrepreneurs who would send me notes and say, when I read the frequencies, I couldn't see myself. But when I read the shadows, I saw myself completely.
That's scary.
It is scary, and it really relates to the church as well.
Yeah.
It's easier to operate from shadow. What I cannot tell you, I wish I could say this, shadows will not make you unsuccessful. Shadows can make you very successful.
Which is the worst part of that scenario.
That's right. And so if you're looking for validation that the shadows are bad based on success, it's not going to work.
Wow.
Because people succeed in the shadows, but you don't find wholeness and health and fulfillment in the shadows. And frankly, a lot of Christianity even, because of our own brokenness, we don't suddenly become pastors or leaders or whatever we are and are whole. A lot of times we're on the journey toward wholeness, and talent overrides character.
Yeah.
And so the talent of the person speaking from the shadow is more powerful than the long, painful process of letting a person get healthy to speak from their light.
I have to tell you, even though it's not a huge book, I couldn't just flip through it. I had to, it's one of those kind of books that you have to stop and think. But then I also went online and I watched a message you gave, because you pastor a church called Mosaic in LA. And I watched this message you gave on Jesus and the 7 frequencies. And honestly, by the end of it, I was in tears. It really impacted me. But I want to touch on a couple of the things you talked about. You talk about Jesus as the motivator, like in Matthew 5, when he's talking to this huge crowd and calls them salt and light. I think sometimes we don't hear what they heard, because we think, well, sure, we're salt and light. We know that. We've read that in Matthew. Well, that was a revolutionary message for those people, wasn't it?
It was, and it was so countercultural. Yeah. Yes, thousands and thousands of people who don't have anything to do except follow him and listen. And so they're dominantly the unemployed. They're the outcasts. They're the throwaways. Yeah. And they're the very ones that a rabbi should not be investing his time in. And he looks at these people that are seen as having no value in society. He looks at them and says, you're the light of the world, and you're the salt of the earth. And he begins to speak life into them. And I think sometimes we're not comfortable with that. We actually like condemning the world. For some reason.
Oh, I know. That's our go-to.
It's a go-to.
Default,
right? Yeah. And if someone looks at an unbeliever and says, you're the light of the world, or you're the salt of the earth, they go, you see, you're violating, you're rejecting the gospel. You're not being true to the scriptures. But Jesus looked at a multitude of people who probably had a lot of criminal elements in there.
That's fascinating. I never thought about that.
And said, you're the light of the world and you're the salt of the earth, because Jesus speaks into our potential. Wow. He speaks into our value. He speaks into our intention, or God's intention for us. And so he's pulling something out of them that isn't in them in that sense at this time. They would not identify themselves as light and salt. No. They would identify themselves as dirt. And so Jesus is seeing something. And I think that frequency is so powerful, because when we get around a motivator frequency, we don't just grow in our belief in God. or grow in our belief in Jesus, we actually grow in our belief in ourselves. We actually go, oh, God can do this in me.
Wow.
Oh, I have God-given potential. I have God-given talent. And a lot of times, I think it's so sad because I think in churches, we thought we have to demean people to elevate God. we have to make people less so we can make God more.
Wow.
I don't need humans to be less. God doesn't need humans to be less. God created you in his image and likeness.
Yeah.
Even you at your best still needs God.
Oh, gosh.
That's why I would hear people say, yeah, but Paul said, it's in my weakness that God has made strong. And I go, yeah, your greatest strength is still weakness in relationship to God's strength.
Yeah.
You don't need to point to what's worst about you. Point to what's best about you, and you're still going to need God.
What I thought was fascinating about that is, that Matthew 11, last two verses, come unto me all who are weary. When I read, I've always loved those verses. I memorized them when I was a kid. But understanding what people who were listening that day, who woke up every single day under the burden of the law.
Yeah.
613 rules. I wrote down what it was. 365 things not to do. So it's one for every day, and 248 things to do. So when Jesus spoke to that crowd, what they heard, they'd never heard anything like that.
No, and they never saw God through the filter of that kind of kindness, that kind of compassion, that God as their healer, which is so odd because even my name, Raphael, is the Lord is our healer.
Oh, wow.
And that's what Raphael means. Rapha is healer, El is Elohim. And so it's rooted in Hebrew theology that God is our healer. But religion forgets who God really is and creates a God that they want to control people with. And so when Jesus is saying to them, my burden is light, when he says, come to me, all of you who are weary and heavy laden, saying, I'm going to take this burden off of you that people put on you in God's name. And I'm going to take it off of you in God's name.
Wow.
And what I think is really beautiful is realize that Jesus is using these different frequencies because he's speaking to different people in different situations. Yeah. And so the dynamic difference. And when I created the framework, I wasn't thinking, well, what are Jesus's frequencies? What happened was it was reversed. I thought, there's no frequency I can have that God doesn't have. Everything that we are is a reflection of who he is, either by our shadow or our light.
Yeah.
And so I immediately started looking at the scriptures and going, wait a minute. Then if this is valid, I can find this in Jesus. And not only can I find it in Jesus, I can find it throughout the whole scriptures, which I can't unsee this now. Once you understand the 7 frequencies, you can't hear the world the way you used to hear it. You begin to hear people differently. And just even on a very, very personal level, I'm an immigrant from El Salvador, and I never knew my real father. My real father spoke multiple languages. My mom speaks multiple languages. So I come from a linguistic family. Languages are a part of our essence. And so is communication. But I never felt understood. Like my mom's awesome, and I love her, and she loves me, and she's still alive, and I'm grateful for that. But I was one of those kids that felt that I was an outsider. Wow. And I felt like my mom never really understood me. And when I became an adult, she told me, I never understood you. You just didn't make sense to me. So I gave her the 7 frequencies, and I gave it to my brother as well, who's 2 years older than me. And I always felt like they had a unique connection, which obviously was hard for me.
Yeah, sure.
And when I gave them the 7 frequencies, their top 3 frequencies were the same 3 frequencies in the same order.
So of course they would hear each other.
And their number 7 frequency for both of them
was your number
was
one?
My number 1.
Wow.
And it was so healing for me to realize, it wasn't that she loved me less. She just understood me less.
Wow.
And because people ask me, are these inherent or are these learned? I actually think your frequencies are part of God's design of who you are as a person. And then they're elevated by your environment.
Wow. How would this change my life, understanding this?
Well, everything in life is about communication.
Yeah.
There isn't an arena in your life where your ceiling will not be determined by your ability to communicate, both to be heard and to hear, to be understood and to understand. And so it doesn't matter if it's as a husband or a wife. It doesn't matter if it's as a parent. I think a huge part of parenting is that parents do not know how to hear the frequency of their kids.
Yeah, I get that.
And when you have a a CEO dad who uses a commander all day at work. Then he comes home and uses that same frequency with his 8-year-old daughter. He crushes her soul. He has to learn how to access a different frequency.
Can you access, can we all access all the frequencies?
Oh, here's what to me is very exciting. There are some systems that see humans as static, like your personality type or something like that. And whether you're an introvert or an extrovert or sensing or intuitive or things and thinking or feeling. And there's so many assessments that really look at us as static beings. But the 7 frequencies is a dynamic system. It says all frequencies are inside of all of us, but we have dominant frequencies. And as we grow as communicators, as we grow in the human connection, we can actually access other frequencies. And the best communicators know how to access the right frequencies for the right moment, for the right people.
You know, it's so funny. I was thinking about this when I finished your book last night. I was asked some time ago by a major drug company to come to this press thing they were having in New York. And they had actors from The Sopranos. They had all sorts of different head of medical teams and different things. And they asked me to come and represent the church. I'm like, I'm not sure the church will be grateful, but I'll be glad to show up. But as I was getting ready for that, it became really clear to me, looking out at this crowd, it's as it's not like me speaking to the crowd of women that I normally speak to, because we're already kind of on the same page. These are different people. And so for me, it began with calling out who I saw them to be, who God had created them to be. And it actually turned into the most amazing experience for me. One of the guys from The Sopranos followed me out afterwards, threw his arms around me and hugged me with tears rolling down his face.
Wow.
And I thought, God, you so want to connect. It's all about connecting and let us know we are not alone in this world.
Yeah, that is so true. And it's funny when you make that last statement, we're not alone in the world. This little bracelet I have on here says 52 hertz on it.
Oh, I wrote that down. That little whale.
Last week, I turned 67 years old.
Wow.
And someone gave me this as a gift because they had read the book. And
tell us about 52 hertz.
It was in the early 90s. I research everything. I'm compulsive about botany, biology, physics, quantum mechanics, geography. It doesn't matter. I just study everything. And so I know random things about meaningless things. But I found in the 90s this whale that was called the loneliest whale in the world. Now it's become more famous because this whale sang at 52 hertz. And all the other whales in the world sing at like 40 hertz or below. And so this whale could travel through the Pacific Ocean and never hear another whale. Wow. And was never heard by other whales. So they couldn't identify a species because you need more than one to identify a species. It was some kind of blue whale. And when I read that article, I had a moment of like self-identification. I said, I think I'm 52 hertz. I think that I feel alone in the world because I haven't found anyone who speaks on my frequency. Yeah. And when you come to Jesus, you don't automatically get on the same frequency with everyone else.
No.
But I tried. I tried really, really hard. Yeah. And so early on, even as I was a communicator and a preacher, I would mimic the frequencies of the people I would hear because I wanted to belong so badly. But the problem is that you kind of revert back to your core self. Yeah. And my dominant frequency is something called the Maven. And I just don't see the world the way everyone else sees the world. I don't make sense of reality the way other people do. And so I communicate in a way that oftentimes makes people nervous. They're like, do we agree with him? Is he right?
It sounds controversial.
Yeah, it sounds really controversial. And so ironically, my kids now, they're adults and they really value me as a person. Like they'll say to me, hey, Dad, we want to help you bring this idea down so that people can get
hear.
it. And so I almost have to have a team of people who help me with my ideas and make sure I can communicate them in a way that connects everyone, which is why the book exists. It's because my kids said to me, you know something about human connection, you know something about human communication that you're not transferring to the world. And we want to make sure that you put this down in a way that people can actually use it as a tool.
Wow. What is the seer? Is that casting a vision that's impossible without God?
Well, that's the ultimate. But even without God, people have the seer frequency. You have the Elon Musk or the Steve Jobs, or they have, the Edisons of the world, who The Wright brothers, the people who see the impossible and find a way to make it possible. And they're always living in the future. But more than that, not only do they have a profound sense of vision, but they make us see more. They pull us into the future. They expand our vision for our lives and the world around us. And when Jesus says to these 11, they're already in atrophy. I mean, the church is already in decline. And they lost their treasure, right?
Not good, yeah.
And now Jesus is saying, go make disciples of all nations. And we take that language usually and go, oh, go disciple people. The only difference is that there were no Christians. The way churches operate today is they disciple Christians. But the way Jesus actually, the mandate out is you have to go disciple non-Christians.
Wow.
Because there was no one who believed.
Wow.
And when you look at it, they didn't even know what the whole world was.
Well, they didn't have maps. I mean, they had nothing.
No, they had the Roman road. They had a very limited view. Even their wildest imagination of what that command meant didn't touch what it really meant. And that's a part of the power of Jesus's vision, is that he created a vision so big that there's room for everyone.
Wow. I love that.
Sometimes we only have a vision big enough for our own life. And I think that's sometimes the problem in marriage when people talk about, well, what does it mean to be in submission? And I go, well, if your mission is so small that no one could ever crawl under it, you can't expect anyone to submit to it.
Raise it up, brother.
Yeah. You need to elevate a mission and have a vision so big that there's room for other people.
Wow. But the one I found really moving, you talk about knowing that his death and knowing what it's going to mean, knowing what's ahead and being the only one in the room who knows. Why was it so significant that Jesus got down, wrapped a towel around his waist and washed their feet?
Yeah, there are several places where I look at Jesus and I hear him, in a sense, emitting a maven frequency.
Maven, yeah.
Where he wasn't commanding, he wasn't motivating, he wasn't challenging, he wasn't teaching as a professor or healing as a healer. He wasn't casting vision as a seer. He was trying to change the way they saw reality. And even one of the more controversial images in John 6, when Jesus says, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you can have no part in me. I mean, he's advocating cannibalism, right? And because he's trying to jar their view of reality. And I know in my own life with my wife, Kim, and my kids, they'll say to me, Dad, why do you have to say it like that? Why can't you say it in a way where everyone can accept it? And I go, because you have to violate their view of reality to actually change it.
Yeah.
And Jesus was violating their view of reality, violating their view of God, of the scriptures, of what God expected of them, of what it meant to be human, and just driving it. And their view of God was a very oppressive view of God. And so when it says Jesus knew that all authority had been given back to him and all power was entrusted to him, then he ties a towel around his waist.
Yeah.
It's not simply an act of servanthood. He's violating their understanding of who God is.
Which is why Peter responded the way he did. No, we're not doing this.
Right, because that is something God would never do.
Right.
God would tell us to serve because, well, we're just minions.
Yeah.
We're just dust. We don't have value. That's why God tells us to serve. So when Jesus serves, he goes, no, service isn't because you're less. I'm calling to service because you're more.
Wow.
Because you're creating God's image. This is what God looks like. So when Jesus washed the disciples' feet, he was actually reframing to them who God is, that God is a servant. It's easy for us to believe that God is all powerful, more powerful than us. It's very hard for us to understand that God is more humble than us.
Yikes.
And
wow.
It's easy for us to go, God wants us to worship him as if he's this narcissistic egotist that just needs adoration. It's hard for us to understand that God is the greatest servant, that he created us and he doesn't need us, but we need him. So who's in the posture of service? It's God creating us. He chooses to serve us by giving us oxygen and food and water and life. Everything God does is an act of service, and God does not see that as diminishing who he is or demeaning, because that's who God is in his character.
How have you seen this message impact people? Like, how have people shifted in their understanding because of the 7 frequencies?
It's been a really interesting journey. The book, I think, came out last October, and we've taken about 20,000 people through the assessment. By the way, if anyone's interested in the book or the assessment, they can go to my website, erwinmcmanus.com.
Yeah, do that. I did it last night. I went online and I took the assessment, and it was really, really helpful. Really easy, just like 85 questions, but it's a really good thing. erwinmcmanus.com.
I think my initial hope was the church is actually, for me, it's so important for the church to be the epicenter of the new.
Yeah.
You know, it seems a lot of times we're always catching up with culture.
Yeah.
I want culture to catch up with us. And just like the greatest music in the world came out of the church.
Yeah.
There's just no question.
Yeah.
You know, and the greatest communicators in the world have come out of the church. And really the greatest insights on human connection and human communication should come out of the church. But the book has been sweepingly picked up by people outside of the church.
Oh, interesting.
And it probably is the language of frequencies, right? And if you believe in the Bible, believe in God, you're like, I don't know, frequency sounds a little out there. And then people without God go, frequencies. This is amazing. But even Albert Einstein said even the future of medicine is all going to be about frequencies. The leading scientists in the world understand that the more we understand frequencies, the more we understand reality. And so it shouldn't surprise you that the Bible actually unwraps that completely.
But it's the test and everything. It's such a gift, though, Erwin, because after I read it, because my son and I are pretty well, he hasn't taken it yet, but I would pretty well guess he's the same 3. And we've always spoken the same language.
Wow.
And at times that's been hard for Barry, my husband, because he's like, well, you love your mother more. And it's not that. It's to do with, I hear you. And I think this book can make a huge difference in your relationship with your husband, with your wife, with your relationship with your children, with the way you interact with people at work. I found myself going through several things in my past thinking, oh, I think I missed that there.
I also think it's really important because so many of us, through our trauma, our brokenness, our pain, and even our environment, are operating out of our shadows. And for instance, the motivator shadow is a performer. And so many even pastors use the performer frequency when they're actually been given the motivator frequency. Wow. Because it's so terrifying to let people see who you are. I was mentoring this really powerful pastor. He's just a wonderful human being. And he was asking me, what's my next step? I said, you have to decide to become authentic. And I said, you're so gifted, you're so talented, you're like the best of the best, but you have a persona, you're a performer. And I remember he sent me a text because he went and spoke, he goes, hey, I tried to be authentic. It didn't go well.
Wow.
He goes, I don't know if I can take this path.
Wow.
And when you raise up young preachers and you affirm their gifting, you create performers rather than motivators.
Wow.
You end up with manipulators rather than challengers. You end up with dictators rather than commanders, with ciphers rather than healers, with diminishers rather than professors, with perfectionists rather than seers, and then with nihilists rather than mavens. And so each one of these shadows are so important. And I would say that a huge part of what can add value to a person's life is to do an internal assessment and go, am I bringing the world my best frequency and my family my shadow? Because that's what I find a lot of times.
Yeah.
Because you bring your shadow when you're tired, when you're toxic, when you're mad, when you're unforgiving.
Yeah.
And because I've had people in the business world say, okay, I clearly am operating in my shadows. How do I get out of my shadow? And I said, here's the good news is you can, but here's the bad news. It's not a technique. Your shadows only change when your inner world changes.
Wow.
And because these frequencies are like neural pathways, they're the way your brain is wired.
Yeah.
You see reality this way. You don't communicate as a tool, you communicate as an essence. The way we communicate is a part of the way we connect and make contact with each other.
That's so fascinating to me because I think of the first 34 years of my life, I probably had the same frequencies, but I operated totally differently. It was only when everything in my life crashed and I felt I was in a place where there was nothing left that was good to say about me and nothing that would make God love me. Because I kind of made a deal with God at 11. Because my father tried to kill me before he killed himself.
Oh, my.
My thing was, love is not a guarantee. It can be won and it can be lost. And it's won or lost based on your behavior. So even as a believer, so much of my behavior was based on thinking I have to show up a certain way and I can never let anybody down. I can never let anybody really into, because I think you talk in the book about the greatest desire of every human being is to be fully known and fully loved.
Yeah.
But we're so afraid that if we're fully known, we won't be fully loved.
That's right.
That we trade away being known. And that's how I lived for years. And it was so interesting that sometimes I just think it's the mercy of God that he would take you to prison to set you free. It's like, here's your greatest nightmare, and that's where I'll meet you.
And I think it is an example of when you're in pain, that healer frequency turns into a cipher where you're just trying to desperately find healing for yourself.
Yeah.
And you're just absorbing other emotions and even praise, adoration, applause. And it's really trying to fill this vacuum in your soul. And when you go through the journey of finding healing, and now you can take that pain of those wounds and you become the healer of other people. And which you are, I think, a really beautiful example of that.
Thank you. I remember when I used to be part of Women of Faith, we had a woman who joined our speaker team for a short amount of time. And her thing was, I've heard you talk about, your battle with mental illness, with depression. I've had this experience too, and I'm going to talk about it. And what happened that night on the platform was really difficult because it felt like she stood there and bled over everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I think when the wounds are so fresh, they're not scars, they're wounds. And it's like that if somebody says, okay, I think my number one frequency is this, but I feel like I need to develop this. How do you shift? How do you develop things that don't come naturally to you?
Yeah, the way that I've experienced this and I've seen this is that if it's your number 7 frequency, it's very unlikely you're going to get there. Yeah. To be really honest.
Sure.
Yeah. But you have that triad of the top 3, and those are pretty accessible to everyone. But the more you communicate, the more they rise to the surface. And so someone might be a healer like you, but your healer frequency is much higher and stronger than them. And so even though you have the same number 1 frequency, it's not the same intensity. And the way you grow your frequency are authenticity and empathy. And I write about that in the book.
Yeah, those are powerful. Yeah.
And so if you want to grow your frequency, you have to grow in authenticity, and that's inviting people into you. And
why is that so scary for us?
It's
because you talk in the book about
Yeah.
you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be authentic.
Yeah.
That's terrifying to a lot of people.
Our defense mechanism as humans is to judge other people. And if we can judge them fast enough, they don't get a chance to judge us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's almost like who judges first wins, And so, authenticity is inviting people into you, and empathy is inviting yourself, in a sense, into other people. And so it's an exchange of souls.
Yeah.
In that beautiful way, and that will elevate your frequency. And then the way you can grow the other frequencies is by valuing the others and listening to them. Because we learn frequencies by experiencing them.
Yeah.
And so my daughter's primary frequency is challenger. Every text I get from her feels like a challenge, even when she's trying to encourage me. Like Mariah's big thing now is like, Dad, you should only do what you love. Like you're at the stage in life where you shouldn't do anything out of obligation. Just do, and she'll send me a text. Are you doing what you love? And I feel like, yes. Well, but I could do it better. And my son Aaron and my wife Kim both have a primary commander frequency. So they both always feel like they're commanding. I have such clarity in my life from what they want me to do. And Aaron sent me a text. He goes, hey, Dad, I have like 5 or 6 ideas. They're all going to come across as commands, but they're really just ideas, just suggestions. So that's actually helped us tremendously.
Oh, yeah, you learn how to frame something. Yeah.
Very, very, very much so. And then even with the healer frequency, one of the challenges with a healer sometimes is that you're inviting yourself into someone's soul before they invite you.
Before they want you in there. Yes. That's very true.
And so I'll joke about it and go, it's not a healer when you say, how are you doing? And they go, great, and they move on. when a healer says, "How are you doing?" and you go, "Great," they go, "No, how are you really doing?"
Follow-up question.
Yeah, and they pause and they look deep into your soul, and you feel like you're being invaded. And so the way you grow in those frequencies is by, first of all, being aware of them and engaging other people with different frequencies, valuing them, and allowing those frequencies to affect you as much as possible. And I become more of a motivator when I'm around motivators. You know, I see the power of a professor frequency when around other people who have a high value for transferring truth and teaching truth. And so with each one of those, I find myself elevating when I allow myself to be impacted by those different frequencies in my life.
This is a daft example, but when Christian was maybe, 13, 14, and I was always on a platform somewhere, I thought, you know what? I wonder if it really would, and he's an only child. And I said to him, would it help you to talk to somebody who's not us? And he said, actually, that would be brilliant. So I found him this great coach. And he went for maybe 5 or 6 sessions, said it really helped him. And then, but for the final session, he said, Mom and Dad, I'd like you to come in and join me for this. And I'm waiting because I think what he's going to say is, Mom, you're just perfect. And Dad, you really push me and yada, yada, yada. And I said, okay, Christian, how have I contributed? Expecting this to be a short sentence.
Yeah.
And he said, actually, Mom, I don't really want to hurt your feelings. And I said, okay, you have complete permission to hurt my feelings. He said, Mom, when you get in the middle, it makes it worse. He said, Dad and I love each other. We differ in things, but you get in the middle and all you actually are doing is you turn the temperature up. And it made so much sense to me that I think I'm trying to navigate all this and keep everybody happy. And actually, I'm interfering with the way relationships are supposed to be, that they're supposed to be able to hear one another.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that would be, I'd really recommend this book for, it probably sounds the 7 frequencies, please, doesn't sound like a devotional to me, no? But actually, it can make such a significant difference in the way that you hear people, the way that you communicate with people, and within your family. I really think it's a tremendous gift. Within your own church community, first of all, why did you call your church Mosaic?
Well, that's so many decades ago.
Yeah, I know.
And I do think I was the first person in the world to call a church just a single name. Before all the movements of all the churches across the world.
Yeah.
And I know it was the first church in the world to take church off the name.
Yeah.
And I got so much heat.
I can imagine, yeah.
Oh my goodness, it was incredible.
Because you were operating in your greatest strength.
I was working as a maven. I was going, all right, I'm going to remove every non-essential barrier between Jesus and people.
Wow.
And I thought, when it says church, Christians know they go there.
Right.
But it says to a person who doesn't believe in Jesus, this place isn't yours. And which is why we didn't have any denomination on it. Why, because when it says Baptist or Methodist or Presbyterian or Assembly, you're telling people who belongs here.
This is your lane, yeah.
Yeah. And so I called it Mosaic and took church off of it because I wanted it to be for everyone. And I picked the name Mosaic because a mosaic is an art form of broken and fragmented pieces that create something beautiful in the hands of an artist, especially when light strikes through it.
Wow.
And so I wanted to say Mosaic is a community of broken and fragmented people that are turned into a masterpiece in God's hands, especially when his light strikes through us. And it's not the elimination of all the jagged edges and all the brokenness and all the imperfections. It's actually the elevation of our imperfection through his perfection that makes us beautiful. And it just worked. And out of Mosaic, then I watched a whole world of, tapestry and elevation. And even my friends back then who had long names on their churches started taking parts of it off, so you go from Saddleback Valley Community Church to just eventually Saddleback to, Willow Creek, Community Church and just being Willow Creek. And you watch churches across the world just begin to reduce. And some of it is because I pay attention to culture and the movements. And I go, whenever something's iconic, it goes down to one name. It's Elvis, it's Madonna, it's Prince. And, if you look back, you really become iconic when it's just one name and no one has to say anything else. Wow. And I wanted Mosaic to be LA's brand for the people of Jesus. And so Mosaic has taken on a very unique brand, not just in Los Angeles, but around the world. Normally the world of artists, creatives, entrepreneurs, innovators. It's sort of like all the outliers. Mosaic is their church.
Is that the same when you travel overseas?
It is. It's crazy. I mean, there are mosaics that are way larger than us around the world, and who have come out to our place and asked permission and became an expression. And I never had that need or even desire to create like a large system. I wanted to inspire things. I wanted to be more of a virus that than an institution. And so because of that, and the whole nature of Mosaic is, I went to LA with a commitment to try to be the R&D department of the church, to be the research and development, to be the fresh, cutting edge. And if you try to make every church in the world just like you are, you're violating your own value system.
Yeah.
Saying, take these principles and create whatever needs to be created in Tokyo or Paris or London or wherever it may be.
We all long to know that if you don't show up, you're missed. But the thing I want you all to grasp hold of right now is how much you are seen and loved and known by God. I know it can be a scary thing to be transparent and vulnerable, but I think that's what Jesus modeled for us. It's kind of holy ground when you study what happened in the Garden of Gethsemane and how honest and vulnerable and seen Jesus was. But I think that's what he invites from every single one of us. The greatest thing that ever happened to me was when I finally came to the end of myself and had no more clever things to say. I didn't have any more scripture verses to quote. I think probably one of the most powerful prayers I ever prayed in my life was that very first night in a psychiatric hospital. And the only words I could get out were, help me. But that's the wonderful thing. That's why Jesus came, that God loves to reach through all those broken places. And I've discovered, that's why I asked Erwin about Mosaic, because I have a thing in my yard that my son made for me when he was little, where he just took lots of little broken pieces and wrote in it, I love you, Mom. And to me, it's a profound memory and reminder. It's a beautiful thing that God can do with a broken life when you give him all the pieces. So I want to thank you for who you are, because so original, so creative, and yet you have brought it to a place, and I don't know if I should thank your family, but you've brought it to a place where it makes sense to us and we can learn how to communicate better. So Erwin, I just want to say thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's awesome. And we will see you next time on Praise. Remember, you are loved.